guys, it's Amy here, and today I bring you 10 facts on J.R.R. Tolkien. As you all know, if you've been here a little while, I am a big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I recently read Humphrey Carpenter's biography on J.R.R. Tolkien. Obviously, beforehand I knew things about J.R.R. Tolkien, I'd watched documentaries and I'd read things about his life, but I'd never fully read the biography. And this biography by Humphrey Carpenter is actually the one that most people read if they are interested in J.R.R. Tolkien, as Humphrey Carpenter actually met J.R.R. Tolkien, whereas a lot of people who've written about J.R.R. Tolkien have never actually met him. Please do let me know if I've got any of these facts wrong. Please do let me know if you've got any more interesting facts that you want to share with me. Come talk to me in the comments, everyone. So let's begin. Fact number 1. Tolkien was born in South Africa, not in Birmingham. A lot of people believe that Tolkien was born in Birmingham. He wasn't. His family lived in Birmingham and his immediate family lived in South Africa. His father worked there. When Tolkien was around 3 years old, his mother Mabel took him and his brother Hilary over to Birmingham for a family visit, but whilst they were there, Tolkien's father died in South Africa, so they never took the trip back because they didn't really have any other family living there, so they decided to stay with the rest of their family in Birmingham. After a number of years of living there, Tolkien's mother died of diabetes and him and his brother were left in the care of a Catholic priest who basically looked after them but would give them to different family members and people in the congregation to look after, but he was their guardian and he was the guy who said what was what basically in their lives. So fact number 2, when Tolkien was 16, him and his brother moved into a shared house under the guardianship of this Catholic priest, but he was kind of putting them in different houses, and living in that house already was Tolkien's future wife, Edith Bratt. For 2 years, Edith and Tolkien met secretly whilst they lived in the house together and stayed up late talking to each other from their little balconies out of their windows. The Catholic priest who was Tolkien's guardian was not happy about this because Edith was not a Catholic and she was also a few years older than Tolkien. The priest believed that Tolkien was too young and he forbade him from seeing Edith until he was 21. He wasn't even allowed to speak to her or write her letters or anything like that. So fact number 3, and this kind of goes on from Edith and Tolkien's relationship. When he was 21, he met with her again. She broke off a engagement that she'd already made to another man and she went off with Tolkien. They got married. The epic love poem / story that Tolkien wrote in later years called the Lay of Lthien, which is the story of Lúthien and Beren. You may recall in The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn is singing the Lay of Lthien and Frodo asks him what he's singing about, and he tells him the story of these star-crossed lovers, one's immortal, one's mortal, and they can't really be together. Basically the story of Aragorn and Arwen. This story, the woman Lúthien, was based on Edith Bratt, and there are various lines in the poem which directly relate to memories that Tolkien has of Edith. I find this to be an incredibly sweet and romantic thing, and when Edith died, Tolkien had Lúthien written under her name on her gravestone, and then eventually when Tolkien died he had Beren written underneath his name on the gravestone as well. You can Google it and see the picture, and it's just, I find it to be incredibly romantic. Fact number 4, when Tolkien had children, he would write letters to them each year under the guise of Father Christmas. You can actually read these letters in the book Letters from Father Christmas, which was published after Tolkien died. Basically each year Tolkien would write a letter from Father Christmas in this shaky handwriting, and there would be appearances from the polar bear that lived at the North Pole and goblins and all these crazy stories that would be happening in the North Pole, and he would leave these letters for his children to find at Christmas, and each year they'd have an update on what was happening with Father Christmas. Tolkien even went to the extent of getting the postman in on it, and he would deliver the letters so it would be even more believable for the children to think that these letters actually came from Father Christmas. I really think this is so magical, and I would definitely do something like this if I ever have children. There are also some other books that Tolkien wrote and they are kind of influenced by things that happened in his real life. Mr. Bliss is the story of a man who's very clumsy. He buys a new car and ends up crashing it all over the town, and that is kind of from a story of Tolkien actually owning a car and being quite reckless on the road. Tolkien was somewhat renowned for not being a very careful driver. And Roverandom is the story of a dog that goes missing and he enrages a wizard and the wizard turns him into a toy, and this dog goes on all these adventures to the moon and under the sea, basically trying to get the wizard to turn him back into a real dog again. The story was influenced by a holiday that Tolkien and his family went on where his son lost his dog on the beach, and Tolkien made up the story so that he would maybe not feel so bad about his dog being lost and knew that his dog was going to be having lots of exciting adventures. Fact number 5, Tolkien was an extreme perfectionist. He wanted everything to be be to the T done perfectly. Constantly be writing letters to his publishers saying that he needed to revise parts of the books and that they needed to be republished with different appendices and different like notes and stuff on what was being written. For The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, he even mapped out phases of the moon and the tides and drew out all this plans of how long it would take Frodo and the Fellowship to move across the land. He really wanted to get it perfect so that there was no question about the validity of the story he was writing. The way Tolkien felt about his perfectionism can be seen in the story Leaf by Niggle. In that book, the character Niggle is painting a grand tree and he wants to get every single part of it perfect. He wants to do every single leaf, and the picture is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and he just doesn't know how to control it, and he's trying to get it all completely perfect. And when he eventually finishes the tree, he realised that it's come to life. It's a real tree. It's something that he's created. And this story can be seen as a reflection on Tolkien himself. He is the character Niggle. He is niggling at every single aspect of the stories that he's written to get it perfect. He wants everything to be absolutely spot on. And in the end, he sees it and he sees what he's created and it's real and it's come to life and it's what he wanted, and it's just oh, so good. Fact number 6. Languages were his thing. Whether it was creating his own or translating from Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon and Icelandic and all these other languages, he knew a phenomenal amount of like grammar and structure and everything to do with so many languages in the world that he was able to create multiple languages of his own. And you can see those in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion especially. Like he created all these languages especially for the characters that he'd made for those books. When creating these languages, he was even writing his own diary in these made-up languages that he was writing, so no one could even understand it. Like, that's a secret diary, like one that no one else can even understand because you've written it in your own made-up language. He didn't want his books to be considered as fiction. He wanted to be creating a heritage and a past for England. He wanted his stories to be our history, something that could be real. Fact number 7. Tolkien was extremely close to all of his male friends. In fact, he didn't even really have many female friends at all. One of his most renowned relationships was with C.S. Lewis, the author of the Chronicles of Narnia. It was actually Lewis that convinced Tolkien to carry on with The Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien and Lewis were part of this larger group of men known as the Inklings. Tolkien would meet with the Inklings and they would discuss literature together, they would translate old poems and things like that, and he would also read to them his extracts from The Lord of the Rings as it went along, as he created it. The Inklings would critique and give opinions on Tolkien's work, but quite often he would just ignore them. I found it really interesting, the relationship that he had with men, and the fact that I quite often hear critiques of The Lord of the Rings saying that there are very few women, and the women that are there don't really have anything to do with each other, they're very separate, most of them are different races. Reading this biography actually made it a lot clearer, maybe not excusing the fact that there aren't really a lot of women, but it did make it more understandable as to why there weren't a lot of women in The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien didn't have a lot of relationships with women in his everyday life. The women that he did have, his mother, his wife, his daughter, are probably the 3 closest women that he had in his life. And no one can really say that the female characters in The Lord of the Rings are portrayed as weak or below any of the other characters in any way. In fact, the women in The Lord of the Rings are extremely fierce and intelligent and powerful, like Galadriel and Éowyn. She freaking takes down a Nazgul. I think the reason behind the fact that the majority of the characters in The Lord of the Rings and the majority of the friendships and relationships in The Lord of the Rings are male is because that is what Tolkien had experience of. From the ages of 18 to 21, he wasn't allowed to even see the woman that he loved, and he spent all of that time at college where he was befriending men and having great times with men, being taught by men. Also, there's the fact that just after he got married, he was sent off to war where he was again surrounded by a load of men who were his friends and were dying around him. You know, he also says that he doesn't like Lord of the Rings to be seen as allegory for war. A lot of Tolkien's friends died in the war, and he was brought back to England because he had trench fever, and when he got back here he wasn't even allowed to see his wife because he was in a different city in a different hospital and he was bedridden. Quite clearly see the effect that that had on him and his story writing. Like, his women are these powerhouses of stability, like they are these awesome characters who are there and they are by themselves, so they are surrounded by men, but they're still awesome characters. I don't know, that was a really long rant about women in Tolkien's work, and I can definitely see where people come from when they say that they aren't really present in the novels. I completely agree with you, it's true. Reading the biography has actually really enlightened me as to why that probably is. You know, he just didn't have experience of having loads of women around him and having really strong friendships with women. Fact number 8. The Lord of the Rings is one book split into 3 parts. Tolkien begrudgingly allowed his publishers to publish the book as 3 parts. Because of the shortage on paper at the time, they couldn't publish the whole thing in one book because it would cost so much that no one would want to actually buy it and they wouldn't be able to make any profit from it. Tolkien was not very happy about this because he wanted his book to be considered a whole thing rather than a trilogy, which it quite often is mistaken as. Fact number 9. A publishing company in America called Ace Books published an unauthorised edition of The Fellowship of the Ring. This was priced at a fraction of the cost of the other editions of Lord of the Rings available at the time and became extremely popular with the students who were studying it for their degrees and things like that in school. Tolkien and his publishers in England and America, who he'd actually had agreements with, were not very happy about this. So what Tolkien did was respond to all the fan mail that he had at the time, telling them that the books from Ace Books were not authorised and that if they had bought them, that they weren't supporting him, they should basically buy the other editions available. Basically led to the cult following of Tolkien's work, spreading the word that these books were not authorised, and the sales of these books plummeted so fast that Ace Books actually contacted Tolkien and said that they would give him a percentage on all the books that they were selling if he would just confirm and say that the book was authorised by him. And finally, fact number 10. The cult following that arose after the final publication of The Return of the King grew to unforeseen heights. Tolkien was inundated with fan mail, people would come and knock on his door in the middle of the day, he would have phone calls from America in the middle of the night because people weren't aware of the time difference. People were graffitiing Frodo lives on the side of buildings and creating this mass of merchandise for the love and awe of Tolkien and his creation of Middle-earth. Tolkien was so invested in his story that he would reply to all of his fan mail with really in-depth responses. He would write and rewrite his responses to make sure that everything was perfect and that he was giving the perfect information back to these people with questions to do with Middle-earth. People would even write and ask for him to name their children or their herd of cattle and things like that, and he would respond giving these like Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon and Icelandic names and give the reasons for why these names would be perfect for one guy's herd of cows. It's just ridiculous and amazing and awe-inspiring, and I find Tolkien to be one of the most phenomenal people. I just wish I could have met him. There we are, those were the 10 facts that I picked out from the biography that I read on Tolkien and things that I've learned over the years on Tolkien, and I just find him to be an incredibly interesting character. I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't know if a lot of people would find this video particularly interesting unless you had a great interest in Tolkien, I don't know. Please let me know down below if you have any interesting facts you want to share. As always, I will leave links to Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, everything I mentioned today down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day and I will see you soon. Bye! And he ends up murdering some people and it's all quite intense. What I actually really enjoyed about this was that it was really quite gory and there were lots of like drug taking and sex and just kind of intense.